Hey, I want to welcome you guys back to another episode of the AWM NFL podcast. My name is Riccardo Stewart, and I'm your host. And as always, I'm joined with my coworkers and good friends, Zach Miller, Sam Acho, and last but not least, Jeff Locke. And so last episode, we started this NIL, primarily talking to parents and student athletes who are receiving money as NIL students, and many of them who were thinking about making that jump next year for the for the NFL. And what do I do now that I already have a little bit of money? And so last episode, we talked about how to choose an advisor because there's so many out there and the differences. And then today, what I wanted to do is just kind of take a mailbag of all the questions that we get. We meet with tons of college athletes that are getting ready to go pro, and there's all these questions that come up. And I'm going to start first with this. You guys have heard me say it once. You heard me say it a million times, and that is more is caught than taught. Meaning majority of what you do is because of the people you're around, usually the house that you were raised in. This past week, my youngest son was playing in a little club baseball game, and his old coach, who hasn't seen him in 4 years, came over and he goes, "Hey," we call him Pup. He goes, "Where's Pup?" I'm like, "There he is right there at shortstop." And he goes, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "Yeah, he cut his hair because he used to have long hair." He goes, "No, he has the same mannerisms as you do," which I'm laughing because obviously I didn't teach him hey, this is how we walk. This is how we, but what chiropractors will tell you is when it comes to kids, you learn how to walk just by watching your parents. And you guys have all seen it. You've been at a grocery store and you're like, "Oh my gosh, look at he's pigeon-toed just like that." When it comes to finances, a lot of that is the same too. And I want to start first with the question that comes up is, how do I choose a bank? Let's just start. I have money, whether you got a big NIL deal or you're just getting your monthly stipend, from the school. And I want to hear how you guys chose the bank. Was it the same bank as your family? And so, Sam, let me start with you first.
Well, the coolest thing for me, and this builds on that idea of generational wealth or generational wisdom, is I remember being a kid and my dad, parents came from Nigeria, didn't really have anything and kind of came with the American dream, the whole thing. But my dad would go to the bank on Saturdays. And obviously it was early in the morning before it would close. And I was, 8, 9, 10, whatever it was, he would bring me with him. And I would just see that interaction. I didn't know what exactly he was doing nor what was going on. We'd go into the bank, there'd be some conversations. He'd know people by name, they'd laugh, they'd joke. And it was this thing. And I remember when I chose my bank, I ended up choosing the same bank that he chose. And now I have similar kind of interactions at times and ended up changing banks down the line. But it was this idea of, oh, wow, my dad did not tell me this is how you interact with people, nor did he tell me this is the bank you choose. But I knew that, okay, man, there's this bank and I would go on a weekend or whatever. And that was one thing. And the second thing I learned too, there's Leonard Fournette, who I got a chance to train with over the offseason. I overheard a conversation with him, and I think it was his daughter. And he was talking about, man, I'm going to leave some money for you for something, right? This idea of hey, if you get good grades, boom, here's a reward, right? If you study hard, here's a reward, right? He wanted to teach his kids about how to build not only generational wealth, but he talked about his last name meaning something. Man, you're doing great at school, whatever. So I'm not sure the whole context, right? Well, I'm sure maybe we'll have him on the podcast. He can talk about it himself. But it was just so cool to see, hear, and understand that the actions that we take as parents, for those of us who are parents, our children are following and watching. And it has this idea of, yes, generational wealth in a money perspective, but also in an impact perspective of things that are caught, not necessarily taught.
Love it. How'd you guys choose banks, Jeff?
Yeah, so my dad was military. So I was fortunate to kind of get grandfathered into USAA, which is one of the better banks out there, and they offer other services.
Great commercial.
Yeah, great commercials. But also, I think we just went with Bank of America because they had the best student bank account. And that's really, I think, how a lot of parents do it, is they see some ad somewhere, they know somebody that set up a student bank account that has no fees, and you just end up doing that. And then you end up turning it into your regular bank account when you're not a student anymore, and then you just kind of go from there without thinking about it again. So that's where I was for a very long time, thinking about my first bank accounts.
Zach, I see you smiling.
Same. I opened a joint account with my parents, wanted to teach me how a bank account works. So it was the Bank of America, I think closest to my house here in Arizona. So literally was all convenience. They weren't good or bad. They were just the bank. And it's all I knew for a long time was, hey, you have money, you put in the bank. Here's how you write a check. Some of that stuff, if you don't learn it at a young age, no one ever teaches you it.
No, No, you get hosed like I did. So I didn't have a bank at first, and I got my first scholarship check, and I got my Pell Grant. So like the two of them combined was like $2,800. I hadn't had $800, let alone $2,800. And you know where I went? I went to the freaking check cashing place that literally like basically said check cashing place. And, you know, they charge you a huge fee and they give you all this cash. And finally somebody in the dorms like, you need to get a banking account. And I'm like, well, how do I get one? And I go to a bank and I walked to the Wells Fargo that was like right across the street from the dorms. And that's how I got a bank, which like leads me in, Zach, how do I choose a bank? And are there some that are better than others, and why?
Yeah, I think when it's your first bank account, I think go for convenience and the ability to have access to your money. There's nothing worse than like needing your money, your cash, whatever you need to get money out from the ATM, and not having access to your money. So like they're called like the money center banks, but think like Wells Fargo, Chase, Bank of America. Those are really your biggest banks with tons of locations nationally. So that's probably the easiest way. Now, if you're actually trying to maximize how much money you can make on your money, online banks is where it's at. Think like your Allies, like you can't go to a location there, but they have savings accounts that will pay pretty close to like 5% right now. So that's actually a good place to put money so it can actually earn something versus if you put it at any of those other banks, Bank of America, Chase, you earn virtually nothing on your money sitting there. And so always you want to be earning money. And then there's even once you have kids, like I had these step accounts where these managed debit cards for my 11-year-olds to learn how to use a debit card. And so I make them pay for all their Sephora makeup and things like that. Girls, man, they like to use those debit cards. So it's a great way. They'll just take that account to zero, and it's a great lesson to teach them.
I mean, we're over saying our target audience is college kids, and so a few college kids have kids. He's like, my 17-year-old daughter got to get her a car. But like staying on that point, Jeff, and maybe you can add to this. And I know it's a little bit off script, but Zach just said, okay, your money could be earning.
Yeah.
When we're thinking about a bank, I've never thought about going to the bank where my money's earning. And he mentioned like 5%. Like, what the heck does that mean?
Yeah. So there's this thing in our world. I'm not going to go into the details in the term, but just think 5%. 5% is just like this floor out there that you should be earning on any of your cash just sitting there. Okay. So the way the actual big banks make money, you put your money in a checking account, they pay you like 0.1% on your money while it sits there. And then they go out and they buy the stuff earning the 5%. And that's how they afford all the retail branches. That's how they afford everything, is they're making the difference in that money. What do you got, Sam?
What do you mean by that? I was having a conversation the other day, and I was trying to have this conversation with the guy who's about to be like $100 million contract. And I was trying to explain, but so you said, I don't want to go into the details. What does this 5% mean? Because this is what the people need to hear.
Yeah. So what you can do with your money essentially at any point in time is you can turn around and you can lend your money that you don't need right now to the US government, which in the world is seen as like the most stable thing you can lend your money to, right? So you can go out there and you can lend your money to the US government and make 4 to 5%. It kind of changes all the time. That's kind of what it is right now, right? And you're good. They would have to be a global catastrophe of epic proportions for you to not get your money back and your 4 to 5% back on your money, right? But you have to know where to put that money. Zach talked about doing an online account. The online accounts are set up in a way where they don't have retail branches. They don't got all these costs to try and make their business run, so they can give you more of that 5% every time, because all you have to do is have an online account set up. So we see this all the time, is people actually not earning what they should be on the cash that they don't need in the moment, which is going out and getting that 4 or 5%. And we see essentially you're giving your money away to big corporations is really what you're doing at that point.
Ooh, that's that good stuff that they didn't teach us ever in school. All right, well, I got a bank. I got a debit card. You know what? Now I need a credit card. Mm-hmm. And I need to build credit, because that's the next question that comes up. Is usually here's what we get. We get a kid who's getting drafted and he has enough money. He wants to go buy a car. He wants to buy a house potentially. And he's like, man, I don't have credit. And there's all of these myths out there on how to build credit. And we hear it and we're usually like, that's not the way. what's the best way, Zach, going back to you, what's the best way to build credit?
Well, the biggest thing is to start early with paying bills on time. And so one of the easiest ways is to apply for a credit card as early as possible, set it on auto pay so that it's literally you're using it and it's paid off each month. This is true of all credit. This is true of rent payments. Once you get a place in college, you're renting, all of that gets contributed to your credit score. And then your credit score is actually not an easy thing to calculate. And there's different types of credit score. So the biggest thing though is getting started early with establishing credit. And then the credit history is going to be the biggest contribution to your score. So getting that on-time payments going, and there is a lot more to it, but that is the easiest way to get started.
Hey, Rick, we're going to talk about those myths. You mentioned some myths with credit, right? And we hear this all the time, and it drives us crazy on this call. So the first myth we hear all the time is that you should carry a credit card balance, right? And we think this, which means essentially you put $300 in your credit card this month, and then you only go in there this month and pay $30, which is the minimum balance, and you carry that $270 extra over to the next month. Right? Someone somewhere, probably someone at a credit card company, invented this myth so they can make money on you not paying your balance off. Right? But that does not help your credit in any way. It actually hurts your credit to carry a credit card balance month to month. So like Zach said, you want to make sure you're paying the statement balance in full every single month to build credit if you can. There's going to be some months you might be tight, but you need to be paying that statement balance in full. The next myth.
Go ahead.
What
is credit? What is credit and why do people
Credit is just how a bank views you in terms of how much they trust you to lend you money. That's all it is, right? So we're talking about you got to establish little credit cards along the way so they trust you with little amounts of money. So when you get to buying a car and buying a house later, they then know they can trust you with much bigger amounts of money. And that's all credit is just a test of your behavior to see if they can trust you with their money they're going to lend you, right? So the other myth, and sorry to riff here, guys, because this pisses me off. I can't stand these credit card things out there. The other thing you got to make sure you do to get the best credit score is say you have $1,000 credit limit. Okay, you want to only spend $250 a month of that $1,000 credit limit. That's called utilization. So you want to use 25% of your available credit. Because then the banks look at you and say, hey, this guy could have spent up to $1,000, but he's so locked in and so good about paying money back, he's only using $250 of it. Right? So we can trust him more. We know he's not going to go out and try to use all of his credit at one time. Right? So those are two of the biggest things we see missed and reasons scores are not where they should be when it is time to buy that big house and you get the really bad interest rate that you don't want.
And there's also there's a hack there that if you want to really boost your credit and your parents have good credit, you become an authorized user on their credit card as early as possible. And you get to kind of share in some of their credit that they have good credit and you get a little bit of that benefit.
Now, if your parents don't have good credit, don't do it.
So you're laughing, Riccardo, but you're being honest.
Yeah.
Oh man, 100%. Trust me, I lived it. I lived it. No, I lived it. Okay, so we're going to continue. We're definitely going to have another episode because there's so many questions to run through. But I'm going to run through just a couple more that comes, and that is Sam. I'm going to start with you because you are someone that people trust, and they're going to ask you a question, and that is how. Now that I have this money, what should I do with it? Not even just investing. I just got a bunch of money. What should I do? How should I think about it?
Well, everybody's different. And we talked about this on some earlier episodes, but there's only 3 ways to use money, 3 uses. You can spend it, you can share it, or you can save it. And the way is invest it. And so if you want to buy something and spend your money, buy something, right? For me, it was a car. I'm not a big spender, but I wanted to get a car when I got drafted 4th round in the Arizona Cardinals, got a big signing bonus. And I still had my Bank of America college preferred checking account. Now they were like, dude, what are you doing with all this money in this account? I don't know. But I wanted to buy a car. So I bought a car. I wanted to help, so that was part one. But also we talk about sharing or giving. I don't know if whether you are a giver or not, like there's so much benefits in giving. And so maybe it's a local nonprofit or a charity. Maybe it's a football camp that you want to throw. Maybe it's a church, right? Giving, there's different ideas, 10%, whatever percent, give part of that money. And then the next thing you can do is start to learn what it means to invest. I was having a conversation last week with a guy and he mentioned that, he's like, well, I'm only going to spend the money that I have, all this money that I'm going to make. I'm not going to spend it. But it's like, hey man, what if you could invest it? What if you could actually like save it? Not save like, okay, well, I'm just going to have a little bit left over. No, find ways to invest and have my money make money, have my money grow. And so everyone's different. But I would say, yeah, there's 3 uses you can spend. Buy it. Maybe it's a watch. So people are watch people. Maybe it's a car. Maybe it's a nice pair of shoes. Maybe it's a suit. Spend. And then you can share, give, because we think that giving unlocks the grips that money can put on people. Give. And then lastly, save it or invest it and learn what that means. Listen to what Zach and Jeff just said about, okay, there's this thing where, what do you say, like almost like a risk-free rate? I could actually, no matter what, get 5% on my money. Wait, hold on. I could lend it to the government. That sounds a little bit fishy. And I'm guaranteed to get it back. Learn about it. And then have a conversation. Reach out. Riccardo will give you the number. Reach out. We'll send you some information so you can learn how your money can make money.
It's good. Well, look, guys, we're going to continue on this. We talked about, like, how do I choose a bank? Last episode, how do I choose an advisor? When it comes to building credit, what do I do when I get the money? We even talked about the things that even come up of, what about taxes as a college student? Do I get taxed in the state that I go to college or the state that I'm from? Do I do an LLC? Do I do an S Corp? Like all of these things that you're not necessarily thinking about, we're going to answer those questions on our next episode. If you have anything else you're thinking about, you have questions that you have for us, please shoot us a text. The number is 602-989-5022. Again, that's 602-989-5022.
The information in this podcast is educational and general in nature and does not take into consideration the listener's personal circumstances. Therefore, it is not intended to be a substitute for specific, individualized financial, legal, or tax advice. To determine which strategies or investments may be suitable for you, consult the appropriate qualified professional prior to making a final decision.